welcome back to Hoffman Reproductions. I'm Ben Hoffman, and thank you once again for joining in with us today. The subject for today's episode is going to be belt axes, continuing on with the tools of the 18th century. And the very first pattern I'm going to show you here is an English pattern of belt axe, but let me back up just a little bit before I go into the different styles. I've got different styles out here. We've got English patterns, French, and then some others mixed in. And just as a little history, belt axes, hatchets, tomahawks, whatever you want to call them, were common tools for the 18th century as far as frontiersmen, soldiers, Native Americans. These were very practical and very necessary piece of gear and equipment for any of those individuals. They served a multitude of tasks. You could use this to, of course, process firewood, drop saplings for shelter, and then, of course, for self-defense. We're in the era of flintlocks, and even the most reliable one, there is, an outside chance that it's going to fail, and if it did, you could pull something similar to this out and have a good, effective sidearm. But as far as the word tomahawk goes, we get asked this question a lot. What exactly is the correct term? Is it, are these known as tomahawks? Are these known as belt axes? Are these known as hatchets? And yes to all of those. It's kind of an interchangeable name if you look at historical documentation. The very first time that the word tomahawk was used in the English language was back in the 1600s. It came from a reference from the Jamestown settlement. And the word that the Native Americans were using there sounded somewhat similar to the English word that we use today, tomahawk. It was a little bit different, but when they inquired what that word meant, the Indians told them that it was a handheld striking weapon. It got the name that sounded similar to the English version of tomahawk. So using that as a definition, any type of belt axe could be called a tomahawk. Now again, historically, if you look at references and descriptions from period texts, you'll see all those words used. You'll see tomahawks referenced, you'll see belt axes referenced, you'll see hatchets referenced, and basically all those were more or less the same thing. I suppose you could have one exception as far as a pipe tomahawk goes. That name seems to have kind of stuck with those, but I've also heard those referenced in period text as smoke axes. So again, any of those terms would be correct to describe a handheld cutting tool that we've come to know as a tomahawk today, but again, belt axe, hatchet, all the same thing. So I just want to show you now some of the different styles that were available during the 18th century, perhaps to help guide you in a choice if you were wanting to purchase one or have one made, or add to a certain persona that you're trying to replicate, to kind of give you a little bit of some guidelines here if your persona leans toward the English or French or somewhere in between. So this very first one that I'd like to show you that I have here, this is an English pattern, as I already said, and one thing that you'll notice with the English patterns that it seems to be indicative of the style, they almost always have a flared blade, top and bottom. It's kind of interesting to note that the English trade knives also have an upward sweep. Perhaps that was just a styling thing, we don't really know, but a lot of the English belt axes have the blade that flares in both directions, as opposed to the French, which slopes down. But this particular one here is based on one that was from around the 1740s, 1750s English pattern. A good medium-sized axe. This has about a 2.5-inch blade on it. I don't have a measuring tape with me right now, but approximately. And it has about a 14-inch handle on it. All the handles that I make today, and it was a common choice for the 18th century, are hand-hewn out of hickory. We know hickory was a popular choice back then for the same reasons that we choose it today. It's a very flexible, very durable wood. It wasn't the only type they used. They also used a lot of ash, and oak was utilized quite a bit, but I've stuck with hickory because of the properties that they knew back then and that we know today. It's a good, tough, durable wood, but that is an English pattern and would be an appropriate choice for those after you know, an English persona if you're wanting to reenact that. Moving down the lineup here, I have another English pattern here, and again we have the flared blade, and the other one had also, you know, we call these ears nowadays, the portion of the pole that flares downward. We're not really sure what they called them originally because nobody, you know, wrote that down in a period text, but they're to help stabilize the axe on the handle. The other one that I just showed had that as well. This one's a little bit more of a different shape, a little bit longer and more narrow. This particular pattern here is a replication of one that was found in western Pennsylvania along Braddock's Road. The Braddock's campaign that marched through there in the 1750s. It probably came from that campaign there. You know, a soldier, a commoner, someone left it behind or dropped it. We don't really know. But this is a good choice for the French and Indian War on up through the Revolution. Again, good hickory handle on there. And the blade width on this one's a little smaller, probably around 2 3/8, and again it's a little longer. We have that flaring blade that the English pattern typically have. But a good choice for that 1750 time period, and even later. Again, one thing you have to remember is just because an axe was made at an earlier time period, 1750s, they weren't going to throw it away just because some time had gone by, and say into the time span of the Revolutionary War. If it was still a good usable piece, it was kept and used and utilized. But that's again another English pattern there. The next two that I have here, these are the French patterns that are popular nowadays. Very popular with Native Americans in the 1750s because the French heavily traded with the Native American tribes. So you see this pattern of axe a lot. This is the well-known, what is called the Biscayne or Biscay, however you want to pronounce it, French trade axe. And you see these at a lot of Native American burial sites. Would be a good choice for those wanting to reenact French, you know, regular troops or militia, or Native Americans that want to carry a belt axe that would be appropriate for the. This is actually dates early, 1600s. This type of axe could go clear back there into the up until the time period of the American Revolution. And you see we have couple of different sizes here. One's a little larger than the other, and historically they had that. They had those from a petite version, such as this one here. I think this blade is around 2 inches, maybe even a hair under, and they had this blade shape clear up until you know, a large felling axe pattern. They use the same thing, and just a couple of distinguishing characteristics of the French pattern. Just with the French trade knives, they tend to fall forward on top. If you look at that, it's just slightly going down a little bit. The bottom edge flares down, and then we have a notch here, and we have a oval pole for the handle to fit through there. But great choice for the time periods indicated. Early 1700s, even late 1600s, this axe was in existence for you know, any type of a French impression, be it regular soldier or militia, and a great choice for Native Americans. This pattern of axe turns up a lot at original Native American campsites, burial sites, so great choice for that as well. And these are also hafted in hickory. While I'm on the subject of the handle, this is a pretty common shape for the 18th century, one that either starts wide and tapers down, or some of the other ones that I showed flare out at the end. Let me just grab this one. You can see the two there. The curve type that you see from the later time period, what some people call a French curve, that didn't come out until the 1860s, but axes from the 18th century tend to have this shape, like this one here, starting wide and tapering down to a narrow profile, or they have one that starts wide, goes in, and flares back out. I really like this one. The other one works good too, but I like this one a lot because of, first off, it's a historically correct choice, but also it gives something for your hand to stop on. If you're swinging this axe really hard and your hand's going down the axe, when it hits that flare, it'll stop it. Not that the others don't work good, but my personal preference, I really like the flare on it. Those two shapes of handles were very common for the 18th century. The last two that I have here that I'm going to show you are the ever popular hammer pull type. These were again very popular with people in the 18th century from all walks of life, soldiers, civilians, Native Americans. And one thing that made this a very useful piece, of course, you see on the end there we have the hammer pull or hammer shape on there. So you've not only got a cutting tool that you can use like an axe with the blade, but you've also got the hammer, which is great for hammering in, nails if you need to, or tent pegs if you need to do that, whereas some of these, such as this one, lack the ability to do a lot of pounding. The hammer pull takes over well for that. And these peaked in popularity around the 1750s into the 1760s. Again, it's not that when it got into the later time periods they would throw it away. That's just when they were in the highest form, with 1750, 1760. And again, it's a good choice. It's one of my favorites because it's very versatile. You've got a good cutting edge on there, and you've got the hammer pull, which will perform a multitude of tasks that maybe the others won't. And the thing to keep in mind is you need to do your research and find out what is appropriate for the portrayal that you're after. If you're going strictly French, then you'd want to lean toward the French pattern, or strictly English, regular soldier, the English pattern. But this one's kind of a happy medium. Both sides would have used this, and popular form with frontiersmen and Native Americans. And this also would double as a weapon too if you wanted to use the back. We have reference to Simon Kenton having his skull driven in by Blue Jacket with a pipe tomahawk. A little bit different, but the same thing. It was lethal on both ends. But all of these are good choices for the 18th century and nowadays. It's just that you need to zero in on your research so you can have an effective pattern to pick, and one that's going to be historically correct for what you're trying to portray. So that's kind of the rundown on the Bellaxes today. Thank you again for joining in with us. We appreciate it. I just want to invite everybody, if you're interested in this type of item and you'd like to see some of the things that we have for sale, please feel free to check out our website at www.hoffmanreproductions.com, where we try and keep it updated. Right now it's kind of, we don't have a whole lot on there because we're preparing for the, and that bird's really annoying, but hey, that's the great outdoors, right? We're trying to prepare for some upcoming trade shows, so after that we're going to have a lot of new items for sale on there for you to check out. But if you got any question whatsoever, please feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to answer it. And also I want to invite you, we have a lot of subjects planned. It's to make videos of. It's just a time factor. I don't always have time to set it up, but if you have a particular subject or an item that you're interested in hearing about, go ahead and leave a comment, and we'll do our best to see what we can do as far as putting a video together for you. But once again, thank you for tuning in today, and until next time.